The one thing with Smaug that defines him, apart from other dragons, apart from his size, is really his personality, and that's what is truly interesting, and obviously Tolkien created that. I mean, just like the scenes with Gollum and Bilbo, we wanted to stick to the blueprint of the drama and the dialogue largely that Tolkien had written.
Well, thief.
It's an important sequence. When Smaug is talking to Bilbo, it's reminiscent of the Riddles in the Dark sequence. You know, it's this sort of one-on-one character study, really.
Time's up.
But of course, with Gollum, Bilbo was able to get on top of the situation.
What have I got in my pocket?
And with Gollum, I think you can. But with Smaug, he's kind of smarter than you are. He's been there for, 200 years. Taken this over from the dwarves. He knows somebody's coming. He's been waiting. I mean, he's sitting there for 200 years on this gold, knowing one day somebody is going to want that gold. Dwarves, whoever. Someone is going to be back. And when that moment comes, it's this little hobbit.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to ADR for Smaugy Smaug. This is my insistence. Please pan to the left, and you're right, and you'll see this beautiful sheepskin floor, which I insist on. I wouldn't get on a flight unless I knew I was going to be acting on this. There will be nudity. This is not your usual ADR session. Smaug likes to slither about in amongst lamb wool. And I wonder why I get into trouble. No, seriously, this is amazing. So what's happening is we're sort of laying down the last third of Smaug scenes, and then that script's going to be finalised and go off to the West Boys, and magic will happen. So basically, I'm getting all the help I can to become the worm.
What you want to do is you want to create an environment that the actor feels that he can become the animal. And so we had a little kind of stage set up.
Well, we need him on a padded surface. He wants to be on his hands and knees. We had to get him up off the ground so that it gives him a sense of playing down to the character Bilbo. The wool was the quietest thing we could put here to make it comfortable from an acoustic point of view rather than scratchy clothes. Yeah? There's been a few jokes about pink fluffy handcuffs, but we haven't pulled them out just yet.
We then arranged a number of mics around him, but it became obvious that Benedict was going to move. He was going to do a lot of movement. He was going to assume the dragon, and he was going to be standing up. He was going to be crouching down. He was going to be doing the whole gambit. And so a lot of work went into working out a kind of a miking arrangement, which was basically wearing one of the motion capture helmets with the mics.
This goes on top of my head, and I look quite like I've got a sort of, it's like a Coldstream Guard cap, isn't it, in miniature? But that's a brilliant microphone, so I can move my head at any angle and articulate sort of his body movements without losing any sound record. So that's very unusual. And this is layered on top of what we've already done with motion capture as a guide to how he'll look and eventually sound, because obviously there'll be some distortion to my voice because I'm not a however many 100-year-old fire-breathing worm who lives under a hill, who can fly, who's very big. Getting there, but there's only so much I could do on a Sunday morning, and yeah, we're about to start, I think, so I better put on the helmet and get going.
Yeah. Hello. Of course you can. Good. Well, I think we should start by just running that thing from yesterday a couple of times, because that kind of leads you, the psychological, psychologically that leads straight into the next scene anyway. So we may as well get into that headspace, and then we can carry on to the next one.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Where would you like to go from?
It's Oakenshield, that filthy dwarvish usurper. So that's Q301.
From that spot. Standing by for take 1, 301. And here we go.
Oakenshield, that filthy dwarvish usurper. He sent you in here for the Arkenstone, didn't he? He weighed the value of your life and found it worth nothing.
not, Oakenshield's quest will fail. The darkness is coming. It will spread to every corner of the land.
Okay. Good. I mean, for me, I mean, I know you're worried about pace, Pete, but I mean, obviously, you can condense the gap between the lines. I'm just giving it enough breath to be able to give the tone of it, but because it's just like a slow to me, it's like a slow Japanese water torch. It's like, I'm just going to tell you what the truth is. I'm going to plant this little seed and watch it grow in your mind as a fit.
There's actually, this has to be shaped quite carefully. There's certainly moments where it has to be heated and movement, and there has to be a sense of movement and physicality, but then it goes back to another getting in this head bit towards the end. Well, why don't we run the next chunk? And just
great. Let's have a look at it.
And have a look at it.
Where does it go to?
Goes well.
How do you choose to die?
Yes.
Standing by to roll. Pitch is on.
I will not part with a single coin. Not one piece of it. My teeth are swords. My claws are spears. My wings are a hurricane.
That was great.
Yeah, that's good.
My claws are spears.
Smaug had to have a personality. That was obvious, which meant he needed to have all the subtle kinds of facial expressions that we're used to seeing in a dialogue scene. And that became really tricky because of the elongated shape to his head. And we realized that a lot of that comes down to the eyes and the mouth, as it does with any other character.
The biggest challenge is bringing Benedict's performance into an alligator almost. It's a big flapping jaw with very little flexibility.
With such a big mouth, you don't need to move it too much to really get words out.
And so what we really did is kind of pushed his whole performance to the front of his face.
So it feels like the front of his mouth is sort of mimicking a human face.
He has weighed the value of your life and found it worth nothing.
Wherever we could, we tried to honour Benedict's acting cues. And what I mean by that is we would study his video and maybe he would turn his head like that, or maybe he'd sort of lift his head back and look down his nose as he's reading the line.
Lovely titles.
He had some nice sort of head moves and things like that, and tilts that were very snide, and it really helped guide it even further as far as what sort of emotion Smaug had at that given moment.
Oh, I don't think so.
When you're looking at a performance, you're looking at the minutia of the face and how it's acting and how emotions cross the face and just little fine things that a great actor will give you that you don't even notice that you're watching.
So we had to make many controls that allowed us to have that level of complexity, but also express in a way a dragon would express.
We had a lot of animation controls within the facial puppet. His nostrils, all the brow shapes, lots of detail in his eye, his throat. His tongue, we felt like his tongue would need to have a lot of detail so that we weren't completely reliant on just lips moving.
And every part of the body can help tell the feeling of the dragon.
Even things like the spikes on the head, we realized you could use those sort of like ears. They helped with his expressiveness.
As he would be angry or whatever, that they could kind of flare out and things, and it was quite a very useful tool.
I think our little game ends here.
We wanted to make him feel big, and more than half of his body length is made up of his tail.
The tail can help us tell ideas behind what Smaug is thinking as he's talking to Bilbo. There's a couple shots where you can see in the background the tail does a little flick, almost in a playful way. That's something that everybody has seen cats do.
They'll sort of lash it around and show their frustration or anger, even if their face and their head is appearing to be perfectly calm.
All of these things, needing to move the tail in certain ways and the neck and head in certain ways and body, helped add to the serpentine quality of him, just sort of navigating through these tiny corridors and crawl spaces.
Peter had the idea of him swimming almost through the gold, being able to kind of dive through it and worm his way through it.
Tolkien loved playing with words, so the word Smaug was derived by Tolkien from an old German word which I think is pronounced smugen, which means to slither through a hole, to crawl through a narrow space.
And I would add, it's also the past tense of the Old Norse verb, which hasn't changed very much, smjúga, which again means to creep in.
So that serpentine aspect is already hinted at, even in just his name.
No, Smaug, chiefest and greatest of calamities.
We're always keen to bring elements from the book into the film version. And one of the striking things from the book is when Smaug's eye opens, Tolkien describes a thin beam of red light, almost like a searchlight.
He was just about to step out onto the floor when he caught a sudden thin and piercing ray of red from under the drooping lid of Smaug's left eye.
So I put that into some artwork.
You could see this light coming out and scanning the room looking for Bilbo, like in the old Rankin Bass animated feature.
We tried to get that to work, and I think everybody sort of struggled with, I mean, what was it, like a laser beam that's coming out of his eye, you know? It just looked weird.
It's a very hard thing to manage because if an eye becomes a source of light, it's hard then to get the creature acting because so much of the acting is going to be in the eyes. Although elements of it did end up in the film.
No blade can pierce me!
Using the eye glow was a way to sort of hint that he's a complete psychopath.
As the sequence was being developed, the layout of the interior of Erebor, had columns at fairly even spacings, and Peter was pretty happy with it. It wasn't until we started working on the trailer that Smaug sticks his head around from behind a column and eyeballs Bilbo. Peter thought that he just didn't look big enough, so we scaled up Smaug. I can't remember what the scale factor was, but it was significant.
So the scale of Smaug became 2 747s. Much, much bigger than we ever anticipated.
Smaug was feeling really crowded now within the treasure room.
So we had to get creative to find ways to make him fit and move within this environment.
And so we removed tons of columns. I mean, he's on rugby pitch size or football field size areas just so that we could get him posed.
You can even see in this particular shot, don't tell anyone, but the wing goes through the column. But if you go to the camera, you can't actually see that. But it does happen.
That was kind of a beauty of the design of the Erebor treasure room, was if something got too tricky or ugly, we could just get rid of a column.
I come from an architecture background previously, so trying to justify some of these huge spaces, it just never worked.
As a shot, I mean, what's more important, having columns in the right places or having a great performance out of your lead character?
But I think the thing with Smaug is that he has got this furnace going inside him. He is now a sort of like a moving, walking fire machine. I mean, I get the idea that when he gets angry, he heats up. Like it's like almost his flame is driven by his emotions, just about. And as he gets angry, when people get angry, their faces go red. When Smaug gets angry, his chest starts to glow, his flame gets out, and the flames become easier to blast out than they do when he's kind of sleeping. I wanted to build in a clue that the flames were coming, and it suited our purposes, certainly in telling the story, that you had a warning that he was going to breathe fire.
And so we did the sort of ripple effect through the chest, the neck, his eyes glow. So to be able to kind of build up the anticipation, so when the fire actually comes out, it's an event.
Take cover!
I was thinking about exactly how he was going to breathe fire and what the flames were going to look like. And, what does a dragon who's as big as Smaug, what does his flame actually look like? There is no reference to it. But then I just happened to see a documentary on TV about the Levens projector, it's called. Now, it's something that probably very few people in the world have ever heard of, but it was a so-called secret weapon in the First World War. And there was only a few of them made. Basically, the British would make a tunnel linking big tanks of fuel underground. And then halfway towards the German trenches, they would make a hole and they'd stick this pipe up, a bit like a submarine periscope. And it was this flamethrower from hell. Honestly, it's the most frightening flamethrower that you will ever see in your life. Horrible, horrible weapon. But finally we had a reference. The Levens projector was the reference for a huge gush of fire.
So what we did was a fluid sim from the dragon of water, and then we ignited it as if it was a gasoline or a fluid.
So basically, every time Smaug was blowing fire, he was projecting something around 150,000 cubic meter of flame.
We didn't get too much into how does this flame work? Like, is there a little pilot light that's always on somewhere and then he's shooting gas past it?
There's a fundamental and absolutely fascinating aspect to the whole idea of fantasy creatures. Do you need to explain every aspect of their physicality? So if you have a film with centaurs, for example, do you need to delve into their digestive system and figure out how a human mouth eats enough grass to keep a horse's body going? Well, I suppose you could find a scientific explanation, but that would just be terribly disappointing. And I think that Smaug's fire breathing falls into that same category. We don't necessarily need to know how he produces fire. He is a dragon. Dragons breathe fire.
I wanted to make sure the fireballs had a sort of a physical presence, so that when the fire gets spit out and when the fire hits the floor, it's actually hitting something, almost like a bomb. And the first time we played this for Peter, he wanted to make sure that every fireball sort of had a vocal launch to it. One of the first vocals I actually did, it's kind of a funny one. I had done this presentation for my daughter's first grade school class, showing them how I could turn her into a dragon. Okay, yep, another one. So I recorded her roaring, and then processed it to sound like a dragon roar. When I went looking for other flavors for the fireballs, I decided, let's just see if that roar of hers worked. And sure enough, it did. So the first one we actually hear in the whole movie is actually my daughter roaring. So how cool is it that a 7-year-old girl can be Smaug?
Don't be shy. Step into the light.
What I've been working the most on this film is Smaug's voice processing, which is taking Benedict Cumberbatch's dialogue reads and processing them up a little bit to make them sound larger.
The thing about Dave Farmer is that he can make things kind of just appear quite effortless in terms of the way he will come up with a sound.
Here he's saying, I hear your breath. This is what the line sounds like without any processing on it at all.
I hear your breath.
So if I just add the processing to that only.
I hear your breath.
So you can see that that still sounds exactly like Benedict, but bigger, like a bigger girth to the creature. And then there's a whole other side of Smaug, which is the growls. I really wanted something new that people hadn't heard before. And the sound of an alligator when it's in mating season has the most incredible low-end gurgly bellow to it. They work perfectly for Smaug, in my opinion. They're different than lions and tigers, and it's not a super aggressive sound, but it sounds humongous. So what I've done is I've done some vocoding on some alligator growls using Benedict's voice to make the alligators sort of talk. And then I just add that in as a small layer right underneath the dialogue so that it just sort of bridges the gap between the alligator growls and Benedict's voice.
I hear your breath.
The cool thing is you can't really hear that there's an alligator bit in there. You know, if you take it away,
I hear your breath.
It's still pretty cool, but a little bit of something goes away. Just a slight bit of animalistic quality goes away.
I hear your breath.
So that's pretty much what I'm going for the whole time, is trying to have the alligator add to the creature aspect of the voice.
There you are, thief in the shadows.
One of the things that's interesting with what Professor Tolkien did with the storytelling is to put perhaps one of his largest creations up against one of his smallest creations.
Bilbo, the most inoffensive of creatures, and Smaug, the greatest danger living in Middle-earth, perhaps. And each one possesses something the other one wants.
So it's really Smaug's job as a paranoid psychopath to get into Bilbo's head and find out why he's there, who's behind him, what the motivations are. Is it Bilbo only? Or is Bilbo got a 10,000-man army waiting out the door? I mean, what is the real threat here?
You seem familiar with my name, but I don't remember smelling your kind before.
Smaug comes across as kind of upper crust English person. When he first starts talking to Bilbo, he has slightly evasive quality of the voice, you know. You seem to be, I don't seem to remember. That sort of suggests, you know, maybe I'm not sure about this, maybe you'd like to correct me.
Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask?
Perhaps that might not be such a good idea. I think Kipling, in one of his poems, he said, "Oh, beware the English when the English grow polite." Yeah. Dragons too, actually.
You have nice manners for a thief and a liar.
It's very difficult to lie to him, very difficult to try and manipulate him. You can't flatter him. So really, it's about his weaknesses. What are his weaknesses?
Like all the best villains, for want of a better word, there's a vulnerability to them because there's something that's weaker than the hero. His weakness really is avarice, it's vanity, it's pride.
Smaug obviously regards himself as socially very superior to Bilbo and indeed everybody else. But his weak spot, as Bilbo seems to realize, is that no dragon can withstand the fascination of riddling talk. If you can intrigue them, it attracts their intelligence. They're like a puzzle.
Through the air, I am he who walks unseen.
Impressive. What else do you claim to be?
And as long as you've got them interested, they won't toast you.
Smaug has the ability to extract these bits of information from a very reluctant Bilbo, and he slips up and he mentions barrels.
Barrel rider.
Now that is interesting.
Smaug therefore sets about quite quickly to undermine Bilbo. Well, why? Why would these people send you in here? Do they really care about you? I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't do that to my friend.
You are being used, thief in the shadows. You were only ever a means to an end.
Smaug is able to create doubts in Bilbo's mind about his companions, who he's been on the road with for almost a year. He really knows and trusts the dwarves by this point. Smaug, in one conversation, is able to undo some of that.
Bilbo can hold Smaug off for a little bit, but in the end, of course, he goes too far. And suddenly, Smaug, you might say, drops the mask and becomes his real self.
You think you could deceive me, Barrel Rider? You have come from Lake Town.
Smaug should, in any other sort of universe, immediately squash Bilbo.
Wait! You cannot go to Lake Town!
And yet Smaug realizes that he can inflict a lot of pain upon this little person by destroying Lake Town, whereby Bilbo will probably carry that with him for the rest of his life.
I am fire. I am death.
When we finally saw Smaug in the movie, the sense of joy and delight in what Smaug ended up being is fantastic.
It's amazing just how quick all this time has flown by from the very early meetings that we had with Workshop. To finally see him in some of these shots, he's become quite a character.
There was so much pressure behind Smaug to bring him to life. When I watched the film for the first time at the premiere in LA, I felt like, wow, we actually did it. I didn't think we could. And we had a great voice behind it, which made a huge difference.
You've got a world of top craftsmen and artists bringing what in my childhood imagination was brought to life by my father's voice. It's kind of a surreal experience.
My teeth are swords.
To me, I realized after 2.5 years of worrying that ultimately it wasn't anything to do with how big he is really, what color he is, how many teeth he's got, what his wings are like. I think when people look back and just remember Smaug from our movie, what they're going to remember is that personality. Smaug is a character, and he's a character because of what he says, how he says it, and that's what makes him Smaug.
Smaug is the greatest of all Tolkien's dragons, probably the greatest of all modern literary dragons.
There's such a lot to be said about the whole theme of dragons. They've been a part of culture forever, really. And chances are that's why we find them so appealing, because they're us.